Cascading consequences of the loss of Arctic sea ice. Losing the remaining Arctic sea ice and its ability to reflect incoming solar energy back to space would be equivalent to adding 1 trillion tons of CO2 to the atmosphere, on top of the 2.4 trillion tons emitted since the Industrial Age, according to current and former researchers from Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. At current rates, this roughly equates to 25 years of global CO2 emissions. Research highlight, loss of Arctic's reflective sea ice will advance global warming by 25 years. Algae that live in and under the sea ice play a much greater role for the Arctic food web than previously assumed. In a new study, biologists of the Alfred Wegener Institute, Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Research showed that not only animals that live directly under the ice thrive on carbon produced by so-called ice algae. Even species that mostly live at greater depth depend to a large extent on carbon from these algae. This also means that the decline of the Arctic sea ice may have far-reaching consequences for the entire food web of the Arctic Ocean. Their results have been published online now in the journal Limnology and Oceanography. We now know that ice algae play a much more important role for the pelagic food web than previously assumed. This finding also means, however, that the decline of the ice could have a more profound impact on Arctic marine animals, including fish, seals and ultimately also polar bears, than hitherto suspected, says Doreen Kolbach. Ice. Algae, the engine of life in the central Arctic Ocean. Experts estimate the washed-up whales represent just 10% of the total number of the dead, with the rest sinking into the sea unnoticed by humans. At least 81 gray whale corpses have washed ashore in California, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska since January 1. If tallies from Mexico and Canada are added, the number of stranded gray whales reaches about 160 and counting, said Michael Milstein, spokesman for NOAA Fisheries. Thousands of whales are dying. Scientists have run out of public beaches for the carcasses to rot. In the August episode of Nature Bats Last, our guest Dr. Andrew Gleekson discussed his recent work titled, Beyond Climate Tipping Points, Greenhouse Gas Levels Exceed the Stability Limit of the Greenland and Antarctic Ice Sheets. The pace of global warming has been grossly underestimated. As the world keeps increasing its carbon emissions, rising in 2018 to a record 33.1 billion ton CO2 per year, the atmospheric greenhouse gas level has now exceeded 560 ppm, parts per million, CO2, equivalent, namely when methane and nitric oxide are included. This level surpasses the stability threshold of the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets. The term climate change is thus no longer appropriate, since what is happening in the atmosphere-ocean system, accelerating over the last 70 years or so, is an abrupt calamity on a geological dimension threatening nature and civilization. Ignoring what the science says, the powers that be are presiding over the sixth mass extinction of species, including humanity. As conveyed by leading scientists, climate change is now reaching the end game, where very soon humanity must choose between taking unprecedented action or accepting that it has been left too late and bear the consequences. Black carbon particles from Siberian forest fires fall down to the Arctic ice. As these particles are black, they absorb sunlight and can accelerate ice melt if found in high enough concentrations. Our graphic shows black carbon concentrations, where high values can be seen emerging from the Siberian forest fires, circulating into the polar circle. Forest fires in Siberia, sending ash into the Arctic. For additional day-to-day, up-to-date evidence of our headlong rush towards a blue ocean event, I recommend readers follow Zach Labe on Twitter and Sam Karana at the Arctic News blogspot. The marine food web isn't going to collapse, it is collapsing, now. Live and direct. The dominant culture and the corporate media are pretending to cover the unraveling of the biosphere, but what they aren't telling you about is the rapidity of the collapse and how the domino effect of crossing these tipping points triggers cascading consequences. Be surprised if industrial civilization survives an ice-free Arctic summer, and we might be only a year or two away from that eventuality. One final comment I would make about the impending ice-free Arctic Sea is that we don't need to have crossed the official definition of an ice-free Arctic to see the 50 gigaton methane discharge from the clathrates as hypothesized by Dr. Natalia Shakova et al. That could burst forth at any moment. John Doyle thinks we will see a 10°C temperature rise in the coming decades.